That's England. Well, my name is Christine Langford. It used to be Christine Whitworth. I was born in Leicester, England in 1939, January 1939. So I'm 83 years old. My father, his name was Charles Whitworth, and he was born in 1905 in Leicester. And my mother was born in 1910, and she was also born in Leicester. My mother's name was Annie Whitworth. I was the youngest of 3 children. The eldest child was Marjorie, my sister, who was like 12 years older than me. And my brother, Tony, he was about 9.5, 10 years older than I was. My father was born in 1905, and they lived fairly close to the centre of town, very close to the Grand Hotel. He was too young to be in the First World War, and he used to work in factories. And then when the Second World War came around, when I was about 4 or 5 months old, he volunteered, and he expected to go overseas. But he never did go overseas. One, because of his age, he was already in his 30s, and they found that his heart was on the wrong side. That's the first time he knew it. So he was one of the home guard, if you like. Arthur Whitworth, actually, he was the youngest brother of the Whitworths, and he was in the forces. He was stationed in Malta in the Mediterranean Sea, and he was a frogman. And the frogmen would swim out to the boats and punt to the German boats and plant mines on the side of the boats so that they would blow up as they went further down the Mediterranean. Marjorie, my sister, I can remember her crying because she wanted to sign up, because the women were not drafted, men were when they were 18. But she wanted to get into the war. They had to be 17 years and 3 months old before they were allowed to sign up, volunteer. Anyway, she signed up as soon as she could, and she went into the Wrens, which was the Women's Royal Navy Service. My mother was always the boss in our house because she had 3 children to take care of, and plus she worked in a factory all of her years during the war, all of the time. And they were buying their house. So she had a mortgage to pay, I'm sure. I have no idea how much it cost, the mortgage. But I don't think we lacked anything. The Germans were bombing Coventry, which was like 24 miles away from us. And as they came back over Leicester, they must have had some spare bombs, and they dropped them in the west end of Leicester. That's where we lived. And a bomb dropped opposite our house. We lived in a terraced house, the very small houses. And 3 houses were demolished. And they had me in a box underneath the stairs because we didn't have a shelter at that time. And I didn't wake up. I was so used to the noise of planes and different things like that. I didn't even wake up. We all learned how to get under our desks. When I was in elementary school, I was very disappointed because we didn't have bomb shelters at school. It was attached to a boys' high school, just plain high school, and they didn't have them. And so we were all taught how to get under the desk. But that's when I was about 4 or 5. So I couldn't wait to get to junior school at Shaftesbury Road because they literally had a bomb shelter underneath their playground. And these big concrete staircases going down. But by the time I got there, it was all filled in, and I was so disappointed. I wanted to go in their bomb shelter. But no. We had a bomb shelter in our backyard, which we could never get into because it was full of bikes and all sorts of equipment. But there was a large bomb shelter in the street where we would run up to. I can remember the planes going over, and it seemed every boy in the area knew whether they were Germans or our planes. But I can remember the day before D-Day because it was my friend's birthday, and as far as I could see were planes flying, south, like over us. I mean, I didn't understand why or what was happening. And none of the women really did. Then something big's happening. Well, the next day was the big jump into France. No one had new clothes because they weren't making new clothes. I can remember sitting for hours unpicking sweaters for the wool, and my mother would re-knit them at night, you know, in different sizes and different things. Everything was on ration, meat, tea, everything, except vegetables. We only allowed so much sugar, and that was very important that we had more sugar because everyone drank tea. We all had ration cards. We were only allowed so much food. And it was a very small amount. I can never remember being hungry. But like we were allowed at one point 1 egg every 2 weeks. We did get some meat, but sometimes my mother would go to the butcher's and they wouldn't have any meat. I remember one time she went there, the only thing they had was whale meat. All the meat was going to the forces, you know, to the people necessary for the safety of the country. So no one really complained. He came home when I was about 6. So I really didn't know him until I was 6, and I didn't like him because my mother was always the boss in our house, and I didn't know him. And there he was, living in the house, and he was sleeping in the same bed as my mother. Well, often I used to, crawl into bed with my mother at night, and suddenly someone else was in there, and I didn't like that. Of course, I got used to him, and I loved him dearly, but it took me a time, because I didn't know him. I wasn't affected by the war. I didn't hate. I wasn't scared. I didn't know any other way of life. I would imagine it affected the older children because they knew what they were missing. My brother said to me, well, we were poor. I said, we were? It was because everyone else was in the same, situation.